Frontline Updates, where we delve deep into military strategies and updates from conflict zones. Today, we're discussing the progress of the ongoing special military operation as of today. I'm your host, Sharifa Muhammad MGT.
I'm Colonel ACO Guntoy, an infantry officer. During the reporting period, the Russian armed forces executed 1 large-scale and 5 group precision strike operations in response to Ukrainian attacks on civilian targets inside Russia. These strikes focused on degrading Ukraine's military-industrial base, energy and transport infrastructure, supporting military operations, ammunition depots, UAV production and storage sites, and temporary deployment areas hosting Ukrainian formations and foreign personnel. Across all axes, Russian forces maintained offensive momentum, expanded territorial control, and inflicted significant personnel and materiel losses on Ukrainian units.
Colonel, today's briefing describes a week of sustained strikes paired with coordinated ground advances. Before we go sector by sector, how should listeners understand the strategic intent behind combining deep strikes with simultaneous offensive action across multiple fronts?
What you're seeing is a classic application of operational depth. The strikes conducted during the week were not designed merely to punish or retaliate. They were designed to set conditions. By targeting military-industrial sites, energy and transport nodes, and ammunition depots, you compress the enemy's ability to regenerate combat power. When those strikes are synchronized with ground maneuver, the enemy is forced to fight while already short of logistics, mobility, and command resilience. From a doctrinal standpoint, this reflects an understanding that modern warfare is not about linear breakthroughs alone. It's about collapsing systems. When ground forces advance into areas where depots, communications hubs, and deployment points have already been neutralized, resistance tends to fragment. That fragmentation is visible in the casualty figures and in the speed at which multiple settlements were taken under control during the reporting period.
Let's start with the northern sector, Kharkiv and Sumy. 2 settlements were taken, and HIMARS systems were destroyed. Why is this sector particularly significant right now?
The northern axis serves 2 strategic purposes simultaneously. First, it functions as a pressure valve. By advancing here, you force the Ukrainian command to allocate reserves that might otherwise reinforce the Donetsk or Zaporozhye fronts. Second, it is a counter-strike axis. The destruction of HIMARS launchers is especially important because those systems represent Ukraine's ability to reach deep targets and shape the rear area. Operationally, losses in this sector indicate that Ukrainian forces are committing mixed formations, mechanized units alongside territorial defense and border elements. That mix suggests strain. When high-end precision systems are lost and replaced only by manpower-heavy formations, the defensive posture becomes brittle. This is how localized successes translate into broader operational leverage.
Moving west, the briefing emphasizes logistics destruction. What does that tell us about the campaign's next phase?
Logistics is the quiet center of gravity. Destroying supply depots doesn't make headlines like capturing towns, but it dictates what happens weeks later. The western axis is about denial. By removing ammunition and supply nodes, you shorten the enemy's endurance. Even well-trained brigades cannot fight without fuel, shells, and repair capacity. This also constrains operational choice. Ukrainian commanders in this sector will increasingly be forced into static defense, not because they prefer it, but because maneuver becomes unsustainable. That is a strategic success achieved without dramatic territorial movement.
Colonel, let's move south. The briefing notes the liberation of Stepanovka and the defeat of a wide mix of Ukrainian formations, including mechanized, mountain assault, airmobile, and marine units. What distinguishes the southern axis in this phase of the campaign?
The southern axis is where layered defenses begin to tell on themselves. When you see a single sector absorbing mechanized brigades alongside mountain assault and marine infantry units, you are not looking at a clean defensive design. You're seeing force substitution. Units with different training philosophies, mobility profiles, and sustainment requirements are being committed into the same battle space to plug gaps. From an operational perspective, that creates exploitable seams. Mountain and marine units are highly capable, but they are optimized for specific environments and missions. When they are pulled into positional fighting against a combined arms advance, their strengths are blunted. The liberation of Stepanovka is less about the settlement itself and more about what its fall signals. Ukrainian forces are being compelled to defend everywhere rather than concentrate anywhere.
The briefing mentions foreign manufactured armored vehicles destroyed here. How does that factor into your assessment?
Foreign supplied platforms are force multipliers only if they can be sustained. When they're lost at a steady rate, replacement becomes episodic and politically constrained rather than operationally responsive. Their destruction accelerates a return to legacy systems and improvisation, which reduces combat effectiveness over time. In the South, you're seeing that attritional logic play out visibly. The destruction of electronic warfare and counter-battery assets in this sector is also decisive. Once those systems are removed, Ukrainian artillery loses both protection and precision. That forces a shift from active fires to survivability mode, which cedes initiative to the attacker.
The Central Axis stands out for the sheer scale of losses, over 2 vehicles of 500 personnel in a single week, and the liberation of Terezhskoye and Suketskoye. Why is the center absorbing so much weight?
Because the center is the weight-bearing structure of the Ukrainian defensive system. It anchors lateral movement between the northern and southern groupings. If cohesion fails here, everything else becomes harder to manage. That's why pressure in the center tends to generate disproportionate effects. What we're observing is sustained defensive action designed to overwhelm command and control. The diversity of Ukrainian units engaged, mechanized, ranger, airborne assault, marine, territorial defense, and multiple National Guard brigades, indicates that reserves are being fed in sequentially rather than massed. That is a classic sign of reactive command under pressure. High casualty figures are not just a measure of intensity, they're a measure of tempo mismatch. When one side dictates tempo and the other is constantly adjusting, losses mount rapidly. The Central Axis is where Ukrainian forces are being forced to fight on terms not of their choosing.
Following up on that, how does this affect Ukrainian operational decision-making beyond the center itself?
It constrains it severely. Commanders begin prioritizing stabilization over maneuver. Instead of asking, where can we counterattack? They ask, where can we afford to hold? That shift is subtle but profound. Once it happens, the campaign tilts toward cumulative advantage rather than dramatic breakthroughs.
Colonel, the briefing describes the Eastern Axis as advancing deep into the defenses and liberating Starokrenka, Petrovka, and Pridorozhnoye. For listeners who think of the East as a slow grind, what does advancing deep actually imply in operational terms?
Advancing deep is a phrase that should trigger attention because it implies more than linear progress. It indicates penetration beyond the first defensive belt into areas the enemy intended to use for regrouping, resupply, and lateral reinforcement. In other words, you're moving into the space where the defender's second and third options were supposed to exist. When multiple settlements are liberated in a single week on this axis, it suggests not merely local success, but an ability to maintain momentum through friction. Momentum is expensive. It requires fuel, repair capacity, casualty evacuation, and command continuity. If a force can keep moving while the defender is being defeated across mechanized brigades, assault brigades, multiple assault regiments, marine formations, and territorial defense units, then you're seeing the defender's ability to restore coherence erode in real time.
You're using the word elasticity. For the audience, connect that to what's happening on the ground.
Elastic defense relies on the ability to trade space for time, fall back, counterpunch, shift reserves, and reconstitute. If reserves are being forced into the line as soon as they arrive, or if armored vehicles are being destroyed faster than they can be repaired or replaced, the defense becomes rigid. Rigid defenses can be broken not only by mass, but by tempo. That's what deep advances often reflect. The defender loses the ability to choose when and where to fight. The casualty figure reported, more than 2,545 servicemen, and the significant loss of armored fighting vehicles are also an indicator of how the engagements are unfolding. This is not simply artillery attrition at a distance. This is contact-driven defeat of maneuver elements. When maneuver elements are consistently degraded, the defense loses elasticity. It stops being able to absorb pressure and spring back.
Now the Dnieper Group reports smaller personnel losses compared to other axes, but it also reports destroying a Buk air defense launcher and a notably high number of electronic warfare and counter-battery stations. Why does this matter?
Because this axis is about operational freedom, not just casualty accumulation. The Dnieper sector is not simply a geographical line. It is a battle space where air defense, electronic warfare, and artillery interplay determine what forces can safely do. Destroying a Buk launcher is not simply removing a piece of equipment. It is degrading an integrated air defense posture that protects critical nodes and maneuver formations. The destruction of 12 electronic warfare and counter-battery stations is especially important. Those systems are the defender's nervous system. They detect, they disrupt, they locate, and they enable retaliation. When they are removed, the defender's artillery becomes more vulnerable, its drones become more exposed, and its ability to contest the electromagnetic spectrum collapses in patches that can then be exploited.
The briefing states that air defense shot down 23 guided aerial bombs, 63 HIMARS rockets, 4 Neptune long-range guided missiles, and 1 near 80 aircraft-type UAVs. Analysts often read those numbers as a scoreboard. How should we interpret them doctrinally?
Doctrinally, air defense numbers are a narrative of contested initiative. Interceptions are not merely defensive success. They are the prevention of operational disruption. Every HIMARS rocket intercepted is a command post that remains functional, a bridge or rail node that remains intact, a depot that continues feeding the front. Every Neptune missile defeated is a strategic strike denied. Every UAV downed is reconnaissance blinded and targeting loops severed. There's also a psychological and procedural dimension. When large volumes of UAVs are being shot down, it means the defender is attempting persistent ISR and strike saturation. If those attempts fail, the defender must either escalate volume, which stresses its own production and logistics, or accept degraded battlefield awareness. Both outcomes favor the side maintaining consistent air defense effectiveness.
UAVs are clearly central to this war. Over 1,000 were intercepted in a week. What does that tell us about the battle space?
It tells us the air domain is saturated, contested, and decisive. UAVs are the backbone of modern reconnaissance strike complexes. They cue artillery, guide precision fires, assess damage, and maintain situational awareness. When large numbers are being shot down, it means one side is attempting persistence and the other is successfully denying it. This has cascading effects. If UAV attrition is high, targeting cycles slow. Artillery becomes less responsive. Commanders are forced to rely on older, less precise methods of battlefield awareness. That degrades tempo and increases risk. In contrast, the side maintaining air defense effectiveness preserves clarity while imposing uncertainty on the opponent.
Colonel, thank you for providing such a detailed briefing on the current military situation. Your insights are invaluable to our understanding of the conflict's dynamics. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. Join us next time as we continue to provide up-to-date coverage on global military affairs. Stay with us for more updates and expert analyses on global defense and security issues. Stay informed, stay secure.
Thank you for the opportunity. I want to emphasize that looking ahead, continued pressure along the central and eastern axes may enable further territorial gains, while sustained air defense success mitigates Ukrainian long-range strike threats. The cumulative effect points toward increasing Ukrainian reliance on external resupply under progressively contested conditions.
This has been Frontline Updates. Subscribe for daily military briefings and in-depth strategic analysis. Visit our platform for maps, transcripts, and exclusive Frontline updates from commanders in theater.